People talk about the axis of autocracies. What they're really talking about is China, Russia, North Korea and Iran. And it's really an informal grouping that I guess you could say are united in their anti-Americanism.
Iranian lawmakers chanting death to America.
We can actually see that they have different interests in this election, but actually the way this plays out is quite different for them.
미국 놈들이 주도하에 군사적 긴장 격화로 지역 정세의 불안정성이 증대되고 있는 현실을 냉철하게 고찰해 보면
The North Korean relationship with the US is the most frozen of these so-called axis of autocracies. At various points in the past 20 years, there have been glimmers of cooperation, particularly on the nuclear issue. And then what's generally happened is that the North Korean regime has broken out of those, either by new tests of nuclear warheads or missiles. The situation we're at now is that North Korea has a significant, certainly regionally significant nuclear force.
For the first time since taking office, U.S. President Joe Biden has extended sanctions on North Korea.
There's nothing more that the US can do in terms of isolating the North Korean economy. So from their perspective, deepening their cooperation with Russia, sending them weapons for the Ukraine campaign and now soldiers is a kind of win-win. There's no lose to it. I mean, possibly from the point of view of Kim Jong-un, a Trump victory offers more appeal in the sense that, he famously boasted about the beautiful relationship that he had made with the North Korean leader.
And then we fell in love, okay? No, really. He wrote me beautiful letters.
But I think the slight issue from the perspective of that bilateral relationship is that Trump 1.0 already tried with North Korea to achieve something, with the general view at the end of it that he'd been played by Kim Jong-un and got nothing out of it.
We have breaking news out of Israel this morning where Hamas has launched a surprise attack within Israel's borders overnight.
If we look at the current picture in US-Iran relations, obviously things have been very much aggravated by the events since the 7th of October Hamas attack on Israel. Iran encouraged its proxies in Lebanon and Yemen and Iraq and Syria as well, in fact, to sort of join in a low-key way by firing missiles and drones and the like at Israel from time to time in order, they said, to show solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza. That's produced all sorts of problems for Iran in a way because it took its proxies or allies into a confrontation that they really had no clear idea how they were going to get out of. And in the case of Hezbollah, which really was the sort of jewel in the crown of Iran's axis of resistance, as they call it, there has been humiliation at the hands of Israel during the past 2 months.
Hezbollah is vowing to punish Israel after accusing them of wounding thousands across Lebanon by detonating explosives hidden inside pagers.
So Iran is in a rather nervous state about things. And I think it's fair to say that if Donald Trump won, that would go up by a whole lot more because Trump killed Soleimani, the head of the Republican Guards, a legendary figure in Iran.
Qasem Soleimani has been killed and his bloody rampage is now forever gone.
The American security agencies suggest that Iran has active plots to try and kill Trump in retaliation for this. So were Trump to get to the White House, we know enough about him to know that he takes certain things personally. And he's said on the record since the Iranian ballistic missile attack on Israel early in October that he thinks the Israelis should retaliate by taking out Iran's nuclear facilities.
Hit the nuclear first and worry about the rest later.
One can't say that the idea of a Harris one is altogether comforting for them either, because she would continue the policy, I think, of backing Israel in its confrontation against Iran's regional allies.
We will always defend Israel against any attacks by Iran in that way.
Your critics are saying that you're going to start another trade war with China.
It's not a trade war. I did great with China with everything.
China, I think, has a very definite interest in a Harris presidency in the sense that Donald Trump has been throwing around all kinds of campaign language about massive import tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles and that kind of thing.
I'm going to put a 100, 200, 2,000% tariff. They're not going to sell one car into the United States.
Trump, in a sense, is promising a trade war with China. which is clearly something they don't want. So they have a clear interest, I think, in seeing Kamala Harris come to power because she's more of an advocate of free trade.
Tensions are rising in one of the most hotly contested regions on the planet, the South China Sea.
With regards to security, it's a slightly more nuanced question. China wants freedom of action in the South China Sea, which they regard as their own lake or backyard, whatever you want to call it. And of course, ultimately, if they decide to blockade or even invade Taiwan, they would prefer an American president who would just allow that to happen. And the really tricky question, which US presidents have danced around for decades, is would they or wouldn't they defend Taiwan in a direct sense if China invaded?
Putin has made his darkest and most specific threats yet about using nuclear weapons against the West.
Clearly, for Russia, the overwhelming imperative is to resolve the Ukraine war to its own advantage. And of course, whether Kamala Harris or Donald Trump win has quite a great deal of impact on that question. Although at times Putin has made rather disingenuous claims that Harris seems like the more stable and reliable candidate.
Она так заразительно смеется, что это говорит о том, что у нее все хорошо.
But I don't think there's any doubt that Putin would prefer Donald Trump to win because of all Trump's promises to bring the Ukraine war to a speedy conclusion, which the Kremlin would assume would be on terms of advantage to them. Now, there are quite a lot of people in Washington who think a Kamala Harris win would actually favour Ukraine more than, for example, a continuation of President Joe Biden's policies, because they feel that he has held Ukraine back in various ways, the way it fights, the kind of weapons he sent. And they sense from the people around Harris that she might be more forward-leaning on this. Now, that's a hypothetical. I think the truth is whoever gets into the White House has reasons to want to see the Ukraine war brought to an end. The question is on what terms and to what extent they're able to roll back some of the Russian gains. So I think if we look at the so-called axis of autocracies in the round, we can actually see that they have different interests in this election. So it is quite hard in that sense to generalise about them having some clear view about this election.